any wargame, anytime.
Well, hello everyone. It is 2024. Um, we are back doing our thing. We had our introductory episode, but now we're going to get into the mix and honestly, Sam, there's a lot to talk about. But before we begin, so Boz can't make it tonight. He's got real life stuff to do. But it's just how it works. But Sam, how you doing, man?
Oh, doing okay, living the life, just one day at a time, right?
Hey, that's all that, and I think that's what I think we said it before, probably, especially for me and you, Sam, probably the worst time to take off a podcast, whenever Old World came out.
Yes, I mean, obviously this is the big thing in miniature wargaming uh, for the foreseeable future, quite honestly. Really shakes up both the market and gives kind of the other its competitors something to actually have to think about. And here we're going to offer some of our initial thoughts, both on what the old world looks like. We've looked at the rules and watched some videos, but I don't think either of us have gotten a chance to actually play a game yet. So
Mm.
keep that in mind. But we also want to talk about like kind of what does this mean for the other companies?
Yeah.
Where do they need to go to kind of compete with GW? Obviously, GW is kind of they really do have a close to a monopoly position on miniature wargaming, um, because of their just immense levels of exposure, their different products on different kind of uh, platforms, video games, novels, and whatnot. So let's dive right into that.
Yeah, and like we're not going to spend too much on sort of the build up and all that's gone into Overme. A lot of people have covered that, so we don't want to sort of retread stuff that I'm sure a lot of people who would Frank and Flank have been following. I will say, it's interesting, sort of in retrospect, right? This all sort of came crashing down maybe 2015, I felt. And really, it was only 4 years that we heard about Old World coming back. And so sometimes we like, looking back on it now, it wasn't that long, really, Sam, that GW wasn't in the rank and flank business, really. I mean, four
I
years,
mean,
it's
it's
not that
it's
long.
yeah. I mean, it feels like a long time. I think just because of how much the miniature gaming industry has changed in the last decade, and both in kind of opening up new markets and also like I don't want to discount the kind of emotional effect. I mean, I played Warhammer Fantasy, starting when I was a teenager, and when they destroyed it, it was a it was a real blow.
Yep, me too. Oh, and I still don't believe it happened. Like I'm still, um, I
We're
don't
we're
believe
we're
the end
in
time.
we're in times deniers here.
Yeah, I'm an end times denier. Never happened. I just refuse it.
Yeah,
I'm still living in that world. Yeah,
Malekith is not the Lich King, or
yeah,
or the witch the or sorry, it's not the Phoenix King. Jeez, getting my properties confused. That's all a lie. That's dark elf propaganda. You
mhm.
know, he is in fact fallen, as his mother is before him.
Yeah. It I guess, and I think what you're hitting on is, so there's two things before we get one, in just 4 short years, the industry. So I think this represents two things. So there's two things kind of to preface this. One, in 4 short years, the rank and flank space has changed a lot. So the other thing to note is that GW came back to the rank and flank space after 4 years. And GW, by the way, has no problem dropping games. If it's not worth it for them, they're done. And they've done it for Blood Bowl, they've done it to Epic, they've done it. But GW only dropped this thing for 4 years.
Well, no, it's more than 4 years. I mean, because how long ago was it that they actually killed Warhammer Fantasy?
It was sort of 20, I mean, I want to say 2015, but it was really 2019 when we started to hear, I guess I would say it this way. It was 2019 when we started to hear about Old World. And
The rumors,
for me,
yeah.
that's enough. Like they were planning it before. I mean, you know what I mean? To announce a game, they must have had it in
Sure.
beforehand. I guess that's how I'm thinking. You know what I mean?
I guess that makes sense. And there was also even after Warhammer Fantasy Battles ended, they definitely there was definitely fan continuations
Mhm.
going much further. Ninth Age Warhammer Armies Project,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and
and
others.
I think that's where I'm sort of hitting at is that GW, they dropped it, but it seems like just a few years later, they were already talking about picking it up again. And I think this represents two things. One, rank and flank is a market, right, Sam? I mean, this is a market. It is. It is a
Yeah,
market that,
yeah, and I think
that
that
people want to play. People want to play rank and flank, right? Sam?
I agree, and I think that they've kind of they've they've really realized I, I don't think Age of Sigmar was the commercial success that they were hoping. I'd have to look at some of the numbers, and because there really is, especially a market for kind of an old school fantasy, system, and Age of Sigmar is kind of too esoteric for a lot of the just old school fantasy enthusiasts. Just even from the get go, the what are they called? They look like Space Marines, and
Sigmarine. They were
this
called
yeah
Sigmarines. So
that well
Sigmarites or something.
yeah
I call them Sigmarines.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah I think that's a common joke, but it's like it's they've they've kind of branched out I think too far in that, and they've realized that what they left behind is actually a significant portion of the market. And this is also things that happen. There are kind of trends in markets in general where things kind of come back into fashion every 30 years or so. And you can go find lectures and such to talk about why that is.
Mhm.
But it's kind of a known trend. And so you know, if you look back, a lot of the people who grew up playing Warhammer Fantasy Battles, where they are in life now is okay. Well, now I'm in my 30s or 40s, and I have, if you're in your 30s or 40s, the general trend is okay. Well, now I have disposable income that I didn't have while
Yeah.
I was a teenager. I'd love to go back and revisit those things that I loved at that time. These kind of trends are known to people who do marketing and whatnot.
Mhm.
And so
And
they
it's
they
enough of them. And it's not like this is, in other words, GW, it's not dumb. And to drop an IP and I mean, in business, just over the long span, 3 or 4 years is nothing. That's a blink. I mean, they at least were planning
well,
this.
especially for a company of their size, right?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, to announce in 2019, that is at least a year of preparation to just even decide to move forward with this. So this was, I mean, in business terms, really quick. This was not a Blood Bowl. This was not an IP that sat in the dust for decades, years. This was just a drop and almost immediately picking it back up. So I think to me, and that's something we're going to sort of get into is this rank and flank is a market. It's a market and people want it. There is money to be made. There is passion. And we're going to sort of like, we're going to have more episodes, Sam, but
well, and it touches a different.
this is sort of our preface, right? Where we're just sort of, man, we're just like I said, there's a lot to cover, isn't there, Sam?
Well, it is, and I think also important is it touches a different kind of niche in gaming than skirmish based games do. And that's like, you and me, you and me, Dan, and we've always been big rank and flank people. And I like playing skirmish games, but it's different. And it
Yeah.
and it and it kind of it hits different. There's really nothing quite like when you get a massive army assembled and you've got to spread across a big table, and you've got like these formations and units and marching up, and it really creates that kind of cinematic thing in my head and on the table
Well, it's
that
not just in
skirmish
your
based games
head.
just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when we play these games, we get crowds. I mean, we're not a
yeah,
crowd, but I would say we get people just walking around in awe.
yeah, just if you're playing this and like you're at a game store. I mean, how many of us? Yeah, we've had all that, the experience of some random person. Oh wow, this looks so cool. Did you do all this? What game is this?
Mhm.
And skirmish games don't capture the same level of the kind of cinematic epic. There's you can't really do you look back at some of like the things in kind of popular media, the Battle of Helm's Deep in the Lord of the Rings, or Minas Tirith and such. That sweeping epic scale that we all kind of like. This is really inspirational. We rank and flank stuff brings that to life better than anything else.
Is it fair to also say more tactical depth? I think that's a fair thing to say, right? That there is a certain greater expertise that you have to navigate these mass battle games more than just skirmish games. Is that a fair
Yeah,
assessment? What do you think?
I think that's fair, and I think it also kind of stems, if you look, what are the origin of wargamings, really does come from kind of both in Napoleonic times and before, generals and other like putting things on a map and saying, okay, if I move this formation up here, they're going to move this formation here, and like that's where this comes from, and we're tapping into that ethos, people, but
Mhm.
like I want to live out my fantasy of being a fantasy general and sending forward, my troops.
Yeah.
It's
So we aren't going to talk about we're not going to get too in depth into the old world rules. Like there's a lot of people commenting and telling you what the old rules are. I think we, what I think that would be good is we just give a few comments about what we think are about the old world. And I'll start with myself, and me and Sam, we've already had some me and Sam have some disagreement here, and that's fine. I think that me and Sam, we've both played Warhammer. We've seen our fair of a lot of editions, and we really, take some enjoyment at different ones. We also play different armies. I'm a dwarf player, so you can obviously see where some of these things that perhaps I feel differently about, or me and Sam are going to disagree on. So,
and
starting,
we'll have more thoughts too once we actually
yeah,
play a couple
yeah.
games as
So,
well.
just broadly speaking, so for me, I think the thing that was a thing that really caught me off guard was the no step up. Um, the step up I thought was a great thing in the game. Really, I had played previous editions and never liked the idea of someone just killing your first rank and you not being able to attack back. It, to me, sort of led to sort of a meta that was all about sort of the charge, all about the Uber characters. I played back in the day when Frenzy used to double your attacks, and you had the Chaos Lord with like 9 or 10 attacks, and they would just murder front ranks themselves. So I was surprised. I didn't I would have preferred they keep step up. The other thing that sort of caught me off guard um was so I know they've done something with AP, and I like it, where they've split AP and strength, right? You can have a high strength, but that doesn't necessarily translate to a high AP. And I love that. I love, because to me, I've always had a beef that the 5 up armor save was pointless in this game, right? Basically, having heavy armor or having light armor and shield, or even heavy armor and shield, which is something really important for a rank and flank game. You seems like you never even took it, right? You were always hit by something that just had enough to ignore your armor save. It's almost like, and I always used to say, why even have armor in the game? Like, why not just run around with your butt in the wind, and why not just play armies that don't have any armor or just have wards? So
Yeah. It's like
when I
you had a 2-up armor, or you basically had no armor, right?
yeah,
That was
so
how it's.
I loved that. When they implemented it though, I felt like they did lower the armor save, lower the negative armor or the armor piercing, I guess. But in other words, a lot of stuff that had a -4 or -5 armor, really at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff just ends up having a -2 armor. And for the 5-up armor save, guys, there's no difference, right? In other words, if you're getting hit with a -4 armor save and a -2 and you have a 5-up, it's like, for me, we're sort of back where we started, right? It seems like it was a problem they wanted to fix, but with the monsters and the different abilities, and there's all this, you really can just, it's sort of to me the same. Okay. Now I think it's better with Cav. I think that Cav are in a better place, but I was frustrated. Like a lot of monsters, like they're getting just these 2-up saves. I mean, these 2 APs, and it's sort of like, for me, where we never budged. It's still, you have a 2-up armor save, you have nothing, right, Sam? So, what do you think about that?
So yeah, I think that is going to be an issue. Is, are we still going to have a bunch of units that pay for 5-up armor that is just basically irrelevant? And that's a balance problem, because those are that cost is factored into the cost of the unit, right? And if you have, well, okay, but a 5-up armor is just kind of worthless, you end up getting really inefficient pointing, which causes kind of long-term balance issues. And I think that's totally
I mean,
a relevant point. I mean, we're gonna have to. I kind of want to wait and see a little bit, and how it kind of shakes up, and where is there still going to be enough kind of validity in taking those kind of normal foot guys with 5-up armor, or is it going to be
and
back
great
to like
weapon,
those?
or
Yeah, yeah,
and they have, and it seems like to me, elite infantry in this game took a big hit. They lost a lot of their AP, and they never really got their armor. To me, it seems like it's a at least from me, what I am seeing so far. It reminds me of past editions. It seems like it's sort of hero on dragon meta. You just send a dragon in, and anyway, we'll see. The other thing that sort of caught me off guard was magic. I think they were, so I was sort of sold on, we're toning down magic, and I think that was great. I thought that magic in 8th edition was too much. To me, they did tone down the spells, but now the mage is casting 3 or 4 times as many spells. So it's like, I guess to me, it's sort of instead of nuking things, it's sort of like a machine gun where you're casting a buff here and a debuff here and a hex here and a magic missile here. And it's like, I've watched the battle report, Sam, and it feels like the mage, like it seems like for me at least, it's an oversized fit for the battle. What do you think about that?
yeah. And this is one of those areas where me and Dan actually disagree quite profoundly. I think I think that, and again, based off of my very limited, looking at some reports, and looking through the rules myself, and not having actually played any games yet, I think I like this magic system a lot better, because one of the things that in some of other games, uh, other than kind of Warhammer, other fantasy games, that I've always thought was really lacking is magic. That you could, the fact that you'd be in a fantasy world and be able to take a wizard in your army, and but not have it just be useful. But there's a lot of games where magic is just kind of useless in various editions. Both Dan and I come from Kings of War, and at various points in Kings of War, it was either way too good, or just like, why even bother taking a caster? And I I've always felt that, look, if you're going to be in a high magic setting, and Warhammer is a high magic setting, where the winds of chaos and the winds of magic are just like are active and powerful, then you need to have impactful magic, but not just like random bullshit swingy magic.
Mm.
With at the end of Warhammer, 8th edition onwards, like you got, you know, I'm gonna basically open up a black hole and suck a unit inside. That's bullshit, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, if I'm gonna pay a lot of points for a caster, I've been in various editions of Warhammer where, okay, well, they just counted every single thing I did every turn. I paid a lot of points for a caster that didn't do anything. And I think that it's okay that magic is powerful as long as it's kind of not as long as it's not bullshit.
Yeah. And I guess we'll get a feel. Coming from Kings of War, it does feel very random too. Like I did, I really did like how the magic phase did have some sort of tactics involved where it feels, I know that there is pluses and minuses and special, but to me, it really just comes off to sort of a roll off where the winner wins the ties almost. Because you're going to bring a level 4 wizard. That's still a thing, it seems like you bring a level 4. So it's sort of, I did like it where at least you were tossing dice at a certain one and holding certain dice to get a secondary, where here it's really just roll-offs. Which I don't know, that does to me feel a little tactically flat. I guess
I'll have to kind of wait and see a little bit because I think that let's if I'm abstracting this out a bit, I've got a level 4 wizard and my opponent's got a level 4 wizard, and I'm gonna cast 4 spells in this turn. They're gonna try to dispel some number of them, so it becomes like which ones am I going to get off, and you have to kind of plan around that.
yeah.
um I mean, we'll see. It could be, I could change my opinion after playing a couple games.
And I could too as well. I think, like I said, this is one of the things is that we don't want to spend too much time on. I think we want to sort of okay, Old World is here. Here are some things we like or we think about it. But exactly, that's not really the point of, like I said, we're just sort of throwing in some things. Exactly what you're saying. So, yeah. Um, so Sam, what about you? Some general quick thoughts about the old world.
So my general quick thoughts, and it does look like they toned down War Machines a bit, which really, compared to old Warhammer, really need to happen. And I hope that they just continue that because you know monsters were basically were most monsters in very most of the point of I played Warhammer Fantasy were just kind of unplayable because on turn one you'd get hit with a rock or a cannonball and it would just kill your monster. It's like, okay, well, I just spent you know 300 points on something that died on turn one. That's which it just felt really bad. And the the way that they did that they do War Machines in Games Workshop, and is it's theoretically there's supposed to be some kind of random elements, but the reality was it almost never was. They were basically laser cannons with pinpoint accuracy 90% of the time, and that was just like, okay, well, that feels real bad when my army just gets mowed down before I even take my first turn. Oftentimes,
I agree
so
with that.
that's
I do agree with that. They did need to, and as I say this as a dwarf player who did do that. So fair enough.
dirty stunties, with their just laser bombardment.
Mhm.
Uh, but I also, one thing I like is that they've kind of gone back to having an expansive like list of generalized equipment. It's not just hand weapons, two weapons, great weapons. Let's put in halberds, spears, flails, and have them all kind of be different functionally. I think that's a good thing. It does make it more complicated, and that's kind of one thing I've looked at my initial kind of assessment of this versus both Kings of War OPR and some of the other games I've looked at is there is going to be a pretty high knowledge base to play this competitively, and that's kind of on track with what old Games Workshop used to be. And we'll have to kind of see how much that is. I'm hoping it's a little bit less than it used to be, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. It's definitely going to require more awareness of rules and different faction rules, than a game like Kings of War or OPR.
I mean, cost even. I mean, I was a mark, and I bought the rule book, and I only bought the good guys, but I spent $125, and that's rough. Like, just and now I felt, like I said, whatever GW, I could call GW, oh, they're so dumb, but they got money out of me. I mean, they got money out of my old, because I'm going to buy that old world. And if anything else, Sam, we're sort of leaning into some of our bigger conversations we want to have on this first one, which is the lore. I want to buy that thing because I want to look at the pictures. I want to read the lore. I want, like you said, Sam, I want to go back and I want to relive in this world, right? This world that is the lore is so compelling.
It
I
felt
care about these
alive.
characters. I care about this world.
Because
And
the world always felt alive, and just the really little things. I would love looking through the rule book, and then it would have like this random quote from this wizard, from this chaos champion, and it was just like you just felt that the world really had a depth of soul to it.
yeah,
And it was dark and horrific at times, but it really, it gave you so much. And honestly, I've not seen another game capture that.
yeah.
Uh, and it's, which is kind of sad because that it's
Well, let's be a little happier. Not yet. So, you're and exactly. So we're sort of. It's funny. We're all sort of dovetailing to what me and Sam really want to talk about, which is, so for one, old world. So there's a lot of speculation. We'll go, like, Sam, let's just have a speculation real fast. Is the old world here, or will it crumble? So, this is just our, if we're a gambling man, if you have to bet, will the old world, is this going to be around, or is it going to crumble? For me, I don't think it's going to be around. I don't. I think that, to me, I think that GW is going to sort of get their money and not really give it. I think this is GW, and they're not going to give it the support it really needs. I think they're not going to really update the rules. I think there's going to be balance issues, and it's really going to fall basically heavily on the community to support this game. So I have my doubts about the old world's long-term future. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, see, I actually disagree. I think that there is a pretty good chance that this is going to be the big thing in rank and flanked fantasy wargaming for quite some time. And the reason I think that is because if you kind of compare where we are today versus where we are when GW did cancel Warhammer Fantasy, their company is in a very different position. They have achieved kind of a level of both market dominance and kind of exposure that they did not have back in the day. You know, we're gonna at some point in the works down, is gonna be a 40K series with Henry Cavill in it. That was announced. And that's a pretty substantial thing, you know.
It's a real tough thing
And
because
it's kind of a marker of where they are as a company too, right? They have a level uh, now that I think that even if it's not immensely profitable for them, it's going to be enough that they're going to want to keep going. I think if anything, I'm actually really curious to see how this is going to compete with Age of Sigmar, and if there's going to be uh, any kind of back and forth between those two properties of theirs, and how that shakes up. I think that there is a reasonable chance that if anything gets canceled, it's going to be Age of Sigmar, and that's maybe a bold prediction.
That's
Um,
bold. I mean,
I,
I mean, and I'm gonna be, I mean, for me, it's hard for me to, GW, for them to, it was really surprising when they basically came out up front and they said the legacy armies are not going to get supported in the future. They are going to get their legacy PDFs, and we're only supporting these armies, and that's it. That, I mean, man, for GW to just out front say that is, now I know that of course things can change, but like, I don't know, like that is I mean,
I
that
think
is
that change.
GW sort of just being
I,
very, very candid. And I think some people took offense to it, but I was happy about it in the sense that at least they were honest, where they said, now, and to me, can this game survive with only the 9 factions? No. And it has to have, we have to have the other factions come in. And I think you're hitting on something, Sam. What IP are they going to drop? Is it going to be Age of Sigmar, or is it going to be Old World?
and so I have my reasons for thinking that it will
Yeah.
be ultimately it will be Age of Sigmar. Um, and again, we could both be wrong, and they could just do them both. But
Hmm.
my reasons are, I think that quite honestly, the lore and the world of the old world is just much better than the world for Age of Sigmar. It has a lot more potential. It has directions that you could go that kind of haven't ever been explored. I mean, there were always factions that never had armies in um, Warhammer. We had whole sections of the map that just there was never any kind of armies for. We have Cathay and Nippon and stuff that never Estalia and I mean these places that never really had uh, armies, but they had lore there. There was so much potential
Well,
in that
not with
world.
GW. One of their, so we'll talk about Warhammer Armies, but you're kind of hinting at Warhammer Armies project. But yeah, we'll get there in just a second. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And like,
But GW
there's so
could do
much to
that. Like that's
explore.
it's their stuff, and I think that they have an opportunity now to do that they kind of at one point abandoned. I mean, and we'll see. But I feel like there's at least a decent chance that as the old world comes out, as it becomes gets a certain level of popularity, that more and more people are going to jump on it.
Yeah.
And
I will, if it happens, so I'll make a further bold prediction, and that is, if they do support games, and I think this would be a good idea. I think they would have a shared. I think they're going to retcon, like they'd have to. They would have to basically. This is what I would imagine. I think they wouldn't support two independent games. They'd find a way to bring the two worlds together. Some sort of cataclysmic time. They're
yeah,
gonna get their time things or
some kind of
something,
some
and
kind
they're
of
gonna
rift in space
bring
time.
Sigmar, and they're gonna find a way to bring the old world back, but connected to the Age of Sigmar world, right? And now I'm not saying this, I'm saying if we're gonna make bold predictions, I could see that. A world where
The,
the Age
the,
of
the
Sigmar fights, is
maybe
a
this
piece
is
of the old.
their
Maybe.
maybe their long game is their attempt to actually rectify the mistakes that they made when
Hmm.
they kind of abandoned the old world. Is okay, let's go back and start the old world and then bring everything together. I mean, that's possible. We'll see. um
Okay.
I would be interested to see if that happens, but that's
It's a good time to be rank and flank. So let's get into our next section. All right, so we've talked about old world, we've talked about some possible predictions, but I think that we really can't continue to talk about rank and flank until we start trying to talk about some of the alternatives, because I think unlike when old world went away, when Warhammer went away the first time, there really wasn't an alternative. I think that now we actually have some alternatives that if Game Workshop does, let's just say, blow up the old world, maybe they have an old world end times, and then they blow up this world too for some reason. Um, where can gamers go for rank and flank, Sam? And do you think it's reasonable to? I mean, you're more bullish, I'm more bearish, Sam, but I think it's reasonable to be tepid, right? About this?
Yeah, because quite honestly, I think that there's been a lack of real strategic thinking in some of the Games Workshop competitors, and if they are wanting to take advantage of this resurgence in interest in uh, rank and flank fantasy battles, some of them are doing a good job of that, and some of them are not. And really, there's some really baffling things within the Kings of War, kind of both their release schedule and their kind of priorities, that to me just seems like a huge missed opportunity, both in what they've been doing the last year and their release schedule for this year.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, I think that so we'll get into so the Kings of War is, I think, the traditional place that some people turn to when the original Warhammer went away. And I've always sort of felt that Kings of War has been in an odd spot. Like, do they sort of go down the ninth age path where they literally support all the Warhammer armies and the unit? In other words, they try to just mimic the units and the army so that a person could easily transition to, right? In other words, does Mantic try to do that? Or do they
well,
try to kind of forge their own path, I guess, and
and I think
create
they're
their own
half-assing
world?
both.
Yeah, yeah.
They're half-assing both. That's the problem. Is that they ostensibly are saying that they want to have to kind of focus on their own IPs and kind of make themselves distinct from Games Workshop, but they've kind of half-assed it, and they're also just leaving a lot of players who originally went over to them when Warhammer fell apart, just kind of out high and dry. Right? The latest releases from them were Twilightkin, which are kind of dark elves, and have very few actual comparisons to kind of the traditional Games Workshop esque dark elves. And so if you played that style of dark elves, you're just out of luck.
Yeah, it
The
was
Kings of
it
War
was a
doesn't have
really
this.
yeah, I mean, I'll agree with you there. It was, so Mantic has sort of spent the last few years sort of focusing on their brand new armies, Night Stalkers, Northern Alliance, I think even like halflings really. But Twilight Kin was definitely a bold move in that it departed, it took a pretty well-beloved Warhammer army and sort of squatted it and said, this is an army now that's really different, has sort of different models, different, and didn't support sort of the units they had had. It's definitely a saying, I don't know, it is surprising. I mean, whether you like Twilight Kin or not, you do sort of wonder, why didn't they just create a brand new army? I mean, they have about like I think about the knightly armies. Like, why isn't this a brand new army? Why did it have to sort of take the place of Dark Elves? So
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing, right? Is they can't decide. I more and more think that Mantic's decision when Warhammer initially fell apart to, let's make army lists for the armies that we don't already have, so that those players can come here. I more and more, based on what I see from them, is like I feel like they think now that that's kind of, we got our money from them, and now we're just going to completely abandon those people again. Have no, the as new books and such as new updates have been released from Mantic, the disparity between armies, and specifically between the Mantic IP armies, the armies that they make models for, versus the armies that they don't make models for is increasingly large. They've said again and again that they're a model company primarily,
Mhm.
which is I've talked a little bit on this, is a huge blunder, quite honestly. That's as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, they're honest
And
with it. They are that with Mantic, it's sort of it's sort of like I don't man
they're not even being
it seems
smart
like
about
they're instead of trying to maybe stay in the rank, they seem to want to diversify. I know that's the big thing they're trying to pitch right now is the Epic. What is it? The Epic Warpath. So their Warpath game never fell through. The thing is, they're sort of they're doing something similar with their other games. I thought that I played Firefight, was a great game, but they sort of just had their factions. And I always said, why play Firefight when I could play one-page rules and play the armies that I want to play Eldar, play
yeah.
Grey Knights. And
Yeah,
I think
I think that they
I
want to
think
be
that
a small
Mantic,
they
yeah.
want to be a small niche company, and kind of have come to regret the fact that they were seen as kind of a place for Warhammer Fantasy Exiles. I don't
Mhm.
think they actually want to be that. I think they want to be their small niche company and have their kind of, we
Hmm.
have our small amount of gamers, and that's really what they're geared towards. And they just don't really seem interested in
Yeah, yeah.
attracting both players who used to play or played Warhammer Fantasy, or who are going to play Old World. They just seem like they don't want to be, uh, they don't want to be.
I mean, maybe that'll change, maybe, I mean, like with everything happening with Old World, I mean, I think that with Kings of War specific, I think is a pretty solid, it's got its quirks, but it's a really solid system, a rule system, right? It's very solid.
It's in really
It's
bad
got its
need of an update.
issues, and I could talk about, but really, when we talk about the chassis on this thing, it's a pretty solid system. I mean, is it really the only thing that Mantic would need to do to be a competitor is just basically support, do
Yeah, but
another Forgotten Empire, like really just
they're not interested
support.
in doing that though. Like
Well,
they've
maybe they will. I mean, maybe Roddy Renton will watch this and be blown away and just change everything.
yeah.
We
I
can
mean,
hope.
maybe, but their release schedule for this year is their Trident Realms and Forces of the Abyss.
Forces of
And
the Abyss is a good option.
no,
That there's an opportunity
is it
for them
though?
to take the Chaos Gods
They're
and
well,
do what they
yes,
should have done.
except they well, yes, to do what they should have done, which is I'm sorry, I know people get like, well, why does everybody have to be a GW knockoff? Because that's kind of the reality of the marketplace,
It
dude.
is, yeah.
And quite honestly, GW did a lot of the stuff initially, so as far as concepts go, really well. So it's okay that you should have kind of war demons and plague demons and lust demons, and
I mean,
change
it's the
demons or
grim
whatever.
reality that we
Yeah,
face where GW has produced a lot of work.
yeah.
Um,
And you can kind of lament that fact, but it gets really kind of you know frustrating when you can't, you can lament it but you can't ignore it.
yeah,
uh
yeah. Well, okay, so Kings of War, but it's like I said, we'll see what happens with them. Maybe they'll we'll see. But what about so let's talk about GW knockoffs because I think the next company we could talk is pretty much going down that strategy, and that is OPR, one page rules, and they have an Age of Fantasy, and they have a regiments line. So they are pretty much doing what you're talking about, Sam, which is to I think they have lore. I haven't really read it, but they basically just taken the
yeah,
GW armies.
and said let's make rules for the different GW models.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
kind of been their priority. And what they've done with this though is actually created a rule system that's divorced from the profit motive of selling models.
Hmm.
And so you can actually have a balanced rule system when you're not trying to use your rules to drive model sales. They have people who make models for OPR stuff, but it's all kind of, they contract out with other companies to do that. They're not
Mhm.
they're not trying to push model sales by buffing certain units.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, Games Workshop has done that, and it was always really irritating back in the day, and I'm sure they're going to continue to do it. That there's, I mean, that's kind of what they do. And it used to be that Mantic didn't really do that, and now they've kind of abandoned that stance, and now they pretty blatantly come
Well,
out with new models, and let's make these units real powerful.
I mean, that is, I mean, GW and Mantic at the end of the day are both model companies.
Mm.
One Page Rules does produce models, and I think that obviously they would probably make more money if people bought the models. But at the same time, I think that they've, I think what people are really paying for with One Page Rules is really the system. Um, are One Page Rules models that incredible? They're okay. I mean, they're good, but they're not.
Some of them are really good,
Some of
quite
them are good,
honestly.
but it's like, people have other options for that. Um, I think what people are really, at the end of the day, what people are really paying for One Page Rules, they're paying for a rule system, well, a balance, really. Now, I think that Age of Fantasy Regiments has some work to do because, one of the things is that I think that, so Age of Fantasy Regiments is sort of like a subset of Age of Fantasy, which is basically a blob game. It's a simplified version of Sigmar, but their regiments, their rules do need a little bit of refining. I think that I've noticed that they're trying to, I think, make especially the armies too. They're trying to make the armies work in a like the army lists and the rules work in a blob system and work in a regiment. And really, you can't do that, right, Sam? I mean, I think we talked about this before. You really can't have armies that have all scout and ambush in a regiment system. It's just not going to work.
No, and there is some kind of the core of their core system that works really well with regiments, and there is some that kind of that needs to be pretty heavily adapted. And regiments has always been the OPR game that has kind of the least developed.
Mhm. And
Um,
it does need work. I think even the rule system, like when me and you play, we tend to actually borrow a lot of rules for Kings of War, which I think is a solid system. And I think that one page rules for their regiments, sort of what they did with war fleets, they do need to sort of break it out and pull it out from under that Age of Fantasy cover and really maybe not completely change everything, but tweak the rules, tweak the armies, make the armies work so that it is a real rank and flank system, sort of from the ground up. Um, because so that is what I think the regiment sort of needs, right, Sam? What do you think about that?
yeah, I really do think that they need to spend some some time kind of taking what parts of their system can be adapted, and then also pretty heavily modifying things. And honest, and right now they have a kind of an incentive to do that with Old World coming out. I
Mhm.
think previously OPR hasn't been able to focus much on regiments, and because there wasn't as much demand. But now that there are more and more people going to be flocking to kind of that style of game, I think OPR does have an opportunity here to let's kind of revamp regiments. Let's make it a little bit less clunky, a little bit more competitive, and
Let's grab some
put it out
rules
there.
from how about this? I think that especially OPR and our next company we'll talk about borrow some, like, the old world has some good ideas. Let's take some of those good ideas as the new modified morale system and the fallback things. Like the old world has some new mechanics in here that I think are really nice. And maybe these companies can sort of borrow those, right? And bring those into their system. You know, like I think that's something that old world has, whether, I have some things that, but I generally like old world. I think that it's an improvement from eighth and that they're really doing some things that I think that other companies could adapt to a lot of.
Didn't take too much to be an improvement on eighth, but
Well,
Eighth
okay,
edition was a little wacky.
yeah. Well, so our next sort of a dark horse, but I think has to be talked about is sort of the Warhammer Armies Project, Ninth Age side of things. Warhammer Armies Project got hit with the legal suit with the legal warning from GW. They've sort of went underground, but I do know that they're funded through a Patreon, and they're basically just converting. This is sort of a building stage for them, where they're just converting all their codexes to be completely GW IP free. And they support it through a Patreon. And the guy is a one-man shop, but it's like he is a one-man shop, but he's also focused solely on this. Where you can see Mantic, Mantic and OPR, they're bigger, probably more well-funded, but they have a lot more priorities, right? They're both of those companies are doing different things. Warhammer Armies Project is sort of, if you would, it's a beeline focus on one thing, and that is basically taking the old Warhammer armies and adding them. And by the way, all these armies, the rules on the ninth edition, I guess it's ninth age, they're eighth edition, but it's eighth edition that I think has generally been toned down. They've made a lot of changes that I think are for the better. That if you like eighth edition but didn't like all the crazy overpowered wackiness, you may enjoy Warhammer Armies projects. And a lot like one page rules, they're really just going to be um, copying and pasting Warhammer, and then adding on. They've got Nostalgia. They're adding in some of these, like you mentioned it earlier, right? They're actually working on adding in some of these other countries, their specific armies. So it's
I hope that they continue to do that, but I'm always really, I have a lot of skepticism uh towards this kind of thing, and ninth age, as far as I'm concerned, has kind of not really been very successful because it was very, you had kind of committee driven rules which led to things just never getting done. Warhammer Armies Project, maybe a little bit better because it is just kind of one guy, but it's, I don't know. I'm skeptical about kind of the fan made stuff and in general, and I'm ready to be proven wrong.
it's a
But
dark
I've kind
horse.
of
Yeah, yeah,
I've kind of seen a lot of the fan made stuff kind of will come and be popular for a little while, but then whoever it was that was doing it kind of well, my life changed, so I'm just going to give this up, and then they just never come back to it. And
yeah,
so you always kind of run that risk when it's you know one guy out somewhere doing this. uh well, his life situation could change, and then maybe somebody else picks it up.
yeah.
But could somebody else legally even pick it up at that point? I mean, it gets really kind of iffy territory here. And
So there's
yeah.
two things and I agree. I would say that of the two that we've talked about, this is definitely more of a dark horse. But one of the things that I think has going for it is a lot like OPR. This guy is getting paid to produce a balanced armies and produce a fun game. He's not paid to produce models. So I think that's actually pretty interesting. It's similar to OPR in that and if it gets bigger, he could, hire other people. I mean, I'm saying one guy. I don't know what's going on behind there. I do know it's funded. I know he's bringing in some decent money. And I think that if there is one thing they have going for it is that they are interested in producing good army, good game. That you are going to have all your armies. Could they also take this ninth age or ninth edition and could they grab some things that the old world did, add that to the game? Like I said, this, it may be a dark horse, but I think Warhammer's Armies project could be something that also gets bigger by this. And yeah, these other companies, Mantic and OPR are both doing a lot of different things, right? They're branching out. Warhammer Always Project is just one thing. It's that. So it's an option at the very least, right? Sam, it's something.
I get I'll wait and see on that one, but I'm
Yeah.
honestly, again, I'm skeptical, but again, I could be proven wrong. I'm not omniscient. I don't have a crystal ball. I make predictions with as best of information as I have.
Yeah, fair enough. So that's sort of the kind of the so there are obviously other rank and flank games, but the difference, like I know we've mentioned, Conquest sometimes is brought up in a Song of Ice and Fire, but really these games, you really have to sort of buy their models and do the scale. Like when we're talking about alternatives, we're really talking about I have an existing Warhammer Old World ready army. Where can I take these same models and bring it? And for those other game systems like that, you really can't do that, right? You really have to
Yeah,
sort of
because Conquest has some great models and they have some great interesting factions and whatnot. But they're 32 mil scale. They're 32 millimeter scale. Which some of times looks okay with 28 millimeter scale, but sometimes doesn't. So you'd at the very least have to kind of rebase things and find kind of equivalents. You can't just very easily kind of I have an old high elf army. Where else can I play this with a game like Conquest or a game like Long Ice and Fire, which is obviously set in the kind of world of Game of Thrones. And there are a couple others that are kind of in that vein. Darklands,
Oathmark.
Oathmark. Yeah.
But they still, I think Oathmark probably is a good rule
Oathmark's a
system,
little
but
more.
the armies are so limited, right?
Yeah, they're a little more generic, so you can have more kind of equivalency. Yeah, but it's only like what humans, elves, dwarves, and like two
Orcs and
others or something.
goblins and they have undead.
Orcs and goblins and undead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe one more. I mean, but they're not their selection is not. I mean, like I said,
Mhm.
it's not quite there. I mean, maybe Oathmark would get there. I think it's a great rule system, but it would need to expand and it would really need to sort of expand and bring that in. Well, all right, Sam. Well, I think have we made everyone angry, Sam? Are we? I think we've talked good and
Most
bad
likely, I
about
think
everyone,
between the two
right?
of us, right? Between the two of us, we've definitely stirred the waters a little. So we'll see
Yeah.
what happens, and
Well,
I'm interested in kind of following things and where they go. Right? I mean, we'll wait and see.
it's going to be a great year, and like you said, Sam, I mean, Old World is here. I'm getting ready for Old World. I'm getting my dwarfs out. I'm getting them ready. I've got some Kings of Men that I'll probably be using as maybe some Bretonia. So I mean, I'm going to be playing Old World, and I'm going to be enjoying it. And wherever it goes from there, like I said, we're going to go. The wargaming is good.
All right,
But
guys, y'all have a good rest of your day, I guess.
all right, I'll talk to you
Tune
later.
in next time.
Any wargame, anytime.